welcome to React Native Radio, Episode 8. Today on our show, we have Peter Pikarczyk.
Hey, everybody.
I'm Nader Dabbit, and today as our guest, we have Tadeu Zagallo.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pleasure having you on. Can you go ahead and just kind of give us a quick introduction about what you do and your background?
Sure. Yeah, I'm a software engineer at Facebook. I joined Facebook as a JavaScript engineer, and then I joined the React Native team, but I've been mostly working on iOS. And recently, I've been focusing on performance improvements and performance tooling.
Okay, so like performance within the React Native ecosystem, I guess, or the React Native build?
Yes, performance improvements at the framework level. Yeah, other kinds of improvements on the architecture and even like lower level optimizations and tooling.
Okay, cool. Yes. Just out of curiosity, I know that you live in London. How did you start working with Facebook?
That's actually fun. So I think about 3 or 4 years ago, I just sent my resume to Facebook. I was living in Ireland, but I couldn't join because there was only place available in the US, and I didn't graduate at all. So, and then 1 year later, I went to a conference in Germany, JSConf, and I met some people from Facebook. I went to the process again, and I ended up joining in London. So
cool. So you get to work remotely, I guess?
Not really. The office here is pretty big. So we have a lot of teams that are based in London, and we do interact. In the case of React Native, we have people in London and people in MPK, so we do interact a lot. But it's not really remotely. Like most of the native part of React Native team is here.
So you have like a Facebook office in London?
Yeah, yes, we have 2 actually.
Okay, cool.
Oh, wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, it's not as big as in California, but it's not a very small office either.
So how do you split apart the roles and responsibilities for React Native? Is there does a certain office just sort of handle, like you said, native? Or does a certain office just handle like the JavaScript part, or do you kind of just figure it out as you go?
So React Native started in Menlo Park. They just started there, and it was just mostly JavaScript developers. There was no one very specializing in native, in neither iOS or Android. So then I think I started first Android here, and then the iOS part started here as well. So as soon as we had native developers working on that, they were all in London. So now, I've been doing some JavaScript as well, so it's not like we can't work in the other part of the product, but basically all the native developers are here, and the JavaScript developers are in California.
So one of the reasons we brought you on today is to kind of get into the building of custom components that tap into the actual native side of iOS and Android. So I guess building bridge components and things like that. I'm kind of curious, if someone wanted to build something that isn't already available as an API as far as interacting with the device, what would be the best overview about how to go about doing that?
So we call those native modules where you have some part of native code that you want to expose to JS. So we try to make them available as much as possible. But yeah, it happens that some components we just don't have the use case internally, and we don't get to build them. But it's not a lot of code that you have to write. Most of the people found it pretty easy, actually, at least from my experience, from what I heard from the other contributors.
So what would be a typical use case of someone doing something like that?
In my experience, I think it's more some kind of views or new APIs that we haven't exposed yet. So it's pretty common, let me think of one example of something that was created by open source. So Brent created this React Native video component where you can have videos, of course. So we didn't have it yet, and he needed that for a project. So it's very little code. If you need to create a view, for instance, you just need a small view manager that we call, and it's about few lines of code. It should be really simple.
Yeah, I know one instance that we actually had to do something like that. We are using the Layer messaging API, and they don't have, of course, a React Native specific version. They have a JavaScript and they have a native iOS. So we actually built something around the native iOS to expose JavaScript functions into our code. And it was, from what I understand, a pretty easy process by our native developer here. I didn't actually do any of the coding on that, but I'm interacting with the API and it seems to work pretty well.
Oh, that's great to hear. At first, we didn't have too much documentation, but yeah, we also had like a lot of feedback from the community and a lot of people that went to the process. Like there was so many people excited when it came out, when React Native came out, and they helped us a lot, like improving the documentation. So it was very, very awesome from the community.
Yeah, those documentations has definitely improved over the past couple of months. Back when I started using React Native at 0.4, it was a little tougher than it is now, that's for sure.
It's definitely something that we try to keep improving. It's definitely, there's still some stuff that we want to do better. It's just like, it's a lot of things to document, and we are working on that constantly.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a very exciting framework. Can you tell us a little bit about how the bridging works in React Native? Like, how are we capable of having that API, and how does that all kind of come together? Just like a high level overview is fine too.
Sure. Yeah. So you don't need to explicitly tell what we're going to use, and that's something that I really like personally about React Native. You have your modules on your project, and the bridge finds them at runtime and just make them available on iOS. Sounds a little bit like magic, but you have to add some annotations to your code, and that's all that you have to do. So on the JS side, you basically, the native modules that you access through the native modules object, they're just like placeholders. They're created at runtime as well, and they are just JavaScript objects with functions that are basically just putting your calls into a queue that's then going to be handled to the native side. So one thing that's interesting, and it's maybe a little bit hard to catch at first, that there's no way of calling native from JavaScript in the way the framework is designed. So when you call the native side, you are actually just enqueuing an operation that then the native side is going to fetch. So that's something that I think is interesting to understand.
Yeah, wow, I've never thought of it that way. Can you get into any more detail about that, or?
Yeah, so basically, like the high level overview of how it starts. Let's say you touch the screen, and then we have our own gesture recognizer that's going to call into JavaScript, and that JavaScript call is going to, the result of that JavaScript call is going to be a list of actions that JavaScript has executed during that time. So if during your gesture you call like 3 native modules, the result of that whole JavaScript call is going to be what has to be executed on the native side, and then all the native calls start from another native call. Like there's no way of, in the middle of the execution, JavaScript talk back to native.
Ah, okay. Now go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, that was mostly designed that way. So it's something that was very helpful at first. It's that you can debug in Chrome, and people are more familiar with Chrome. Like a lot of people that do web development use Chrome and its dev tools. But in order to work in Chrome, you have to have a completely serializable API, which means that you have to send message to one side and the other. So it has to be, every call has to return a result instead of calling to both sides. So that's more or less how it works.
So how familiar with like a native code, like as far as Objective-C and Swift goes in iOS and Java and Android or whatever, how familiar with that should someone need to be to get started doing something like that?
It will mostly depend on how complex the module that you want to build, right? So if you just want to wrap something that already exists, let's say like a view that's an iOS that we haven't exposed yet, some kind of different view like a popover or something like that, then you really don't have to know much. Like if you know like very basic concepts, you can do it. And the documentation right now has some better examples that you could be able to do it like without having like any prior knowledge of Objective-C.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, when I just started diving into Objective-C and Swift just for my own sake of understanding how all that stuff works. but I didn't have to do any digging around with any of those native modules for the longest time. I've got a quick performance question for you. In terms of deciding to build something in the JavaScript layer or the iOS layer, what would be more performance? And I've heard there are use cases where JavaScript or the React Native side is much faster than the Objective-C side. Is that true?
Yeah, it's sometimes surprising, but JavaScript can be faster than the native code sometimes. Of course, that you write like the most optimal, it's going to be faster than JavaScript because it has a layer of abstraction. But for a common use case like code, and you have a piece of code that does a lot of allocations, and if you do that naively in both in JavaScript and in native code, it might be faster in JavaScript. But when you have to decide if you're going to write something in JavaScript or native, I think that right now there's like two main things that would make me want to write something native. One is long-running processes that have to run in a different thread. So JavaScript is single-threaded. So you have something that's very expensive, you would rather have that running in a different thread. And by default, if you create a new native module, it's going to be running on its own thread. So that's something I as a native module. The other thing is that if you have too much data going back and forth, then it might be expensive to serialize all that data over the bridge. It's not something that's super expensive, but if you are constantly sending huge chunks of data, then you should probably avoid that.
Oh, okay, cool. Is it possible to split JavaScript among several threads with React Native? Is it possible to just make it work a little differently, or does all the JavaScript that you run in React Native run on that single thread?
All the JavaScript that we run in React Native is in a single thread, yes.
Yeah, so as far as this goes back to a general React Native question, I know you guys have been releasing a new version fairly consistently and a lot of improvements and stuff like that. What is your role in the development of React Native in general, I guess?
Basically, I personally have been working in like performance improvements and tooling, so I don't really like affect the release cycles that much. Of course, we try not to ship like API changes and things like that might break near to a release, to try to keep it more as stable as possible.
Yeah, it's been very easy for us to upgrade so far.
Yeah, we have some issues every once in a while, of course, but we really try to avoid it. But yeah, I personally haven't been working on the release process very closely with the release process. So mostly like on very like a little bit like lower level API things and performance improvements.
Well, yeah, can you kind of go into the performance improvements that you've kind of helped prove and like what exactly goes on with that?
Before I used it to traverse the view tree more often than we needed, and that was something that when you have like bigger view hierarchies like as we have in our production apps, that can get quite expensive. Other things like, so basically when I started in the project, all the native modules would run in a single thread, and we changed it. So now out of the box, when you create a new native module, it's going to be assigned a new thread. That's good because if people do something like naive, like trying to read the whole file synchronously in this thread, before it would block all the other native modules, which would be bad. Now all of them like have their own thread, and it's much harder to do something like that.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting.
In terms of roadmap, what are you particularly excited about, like improving? Is there anything that you're like really excited to, check off on your list?
I've been working on this perf tooling, like, so there's like a couple profilers that I've been working on. So one problem that we have right now is that it's very hard to get like performance insight into the JavaScript execution of React Native, because we have the Chrome debugger, but it's running on your desktop. That's a different processor. It's much more powerful. It's a different VM because it's running on V8, and when you run on your device, it's actually running JavaScript core. So, and there's no way of profiling JavaScript core right now. even if you are in Safari, you get like some kind of timeline profiler, but it's not the tool we were looking for. So if you have used Chrome before, the DevTools, you have like the profiler that's super helpful. It gives you a lot of insight on what's being optimized and what's slower, and it's much easier to improve using that. So I've been working on this profiler that exposes some internal profilers of GSC that allows you to have this much information, and you can use the Chrome DevTools to visualize that. So it gives you...
That sounds really cool.
Yeah, it gives you similar information to what Chrome gives you, but yeah, it's actually data from your device.
Is that going to be available like as far as one of the future releases for the React Native project?
So with the code that's on open source right now, today just released the iOS 9 support for this profiler. So you can get it working, but for now it's a little bit tricky it's not very friendly, the interface and things like that. There's no documentation or anything like that. And that's what I've been working on to get it like ready for people to use it. And that should be out soon.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's actually leads us into a good question that me and Peter wanted to talk to you about as far as contributing to the project. Can you give us an overview of like what you think the most needed parts are for open source and how people can go about contributing to the project?
Yeah, I mean, contributing, this question is pretty good because like there's a lot of ways to looking at contributing to an open source project. Like people often think about like fixing bugs and implementing new features, and that's great. Like we have had like so much help from open source. It's awesome. Like, but there's also like I made sure to get like the latest numbers before we start talking, and as of now, like we have 805 open issues. That sounds like a lot, but we also have like 1,900 closed issues, which is like even more. And we've had like a lot of help. Both like it's awesome that we have that many issues, like, but it's a lot, and sometimes we don't get to go through all of them. We had some contributors like Brent Vatner. He's helping us a lot, and he organized some triages with the community, and they just closed so many issues. That's super helpful. Like Christopher Shadow also posted a link to a website called Product Panes, where people can vote for the most wanted features for the features that they want the most in React Native.
What's the website name?
Product Panes. Yeah, he tweeted about it recently, and people have been adding like all kinds of features, and super nice.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I just pulled it up, the website. That's very interesting. We'll definitely link to that. I don't think I was aware of that.
Yeah, it's good for everyone. Like, because if you just want that feature to get built, it's the best way of letting us know that that's actually something that the community wants and help us prioritize that. Also, if you want to work on some issue and on some feature, and you want to make sure that's going to be impactful for the community, you can also go there and start working on it. So, I mean, if you're looking for what to do, like, as I said, there's like a lot of open issues and pull requests even to review, or if you want to help or get some pull requests that people start working on it and you want to be soon. So I think that's, if you want to find what's work on, I think that's and Product Panes is a very good way to find it. If you want to know, like, if there's someone working on it, I think really the best way is check if there's an open issue. If there is an open issue that nobody has been, that's not active, just ping the person. If you are not sure, like, just ping us on Twitter. Everyone's going to be happy to help you contribute. So we're really happy that so many people have been contributing. So anyone that you ping is going to be really, really helpful, I guess. That's what I would expect. And about the pull request, if you are not sure, like, about coding styles or things like that, we have a contributing file that should give you like some starting information. But if that's not enough, and if you want more information, just open the pull request and talk to us, and we're going to be happy to help you.
Okay, I have a question that goes back to the topic of building the native components or the bridging of native components. Is there anything that you're aware of that anyone's talked about building, maybe a tool or some type of framework or something like that makes that process maybe a little easier, or if there is any need for something like that, is there any way to contribute to something like that if there already is something existing there?
In which sense? You mean like automating the process, or?
Yeah, maybe either automating the process or having a different way to do it as far as maybe just making either like, I guess in my eyes, maybe like a is there maybe a section on the website that kind of goes into this specifically, or like, I guess maybe just a learning resource, or if not a learning resource, or maybe in addition to a learning resource, something that is maybe some type of like framework or user interface for doing something like that, I guess.
I mean, about creating native modules, if you go to the documentation, there's a section about that I consider quite helpful. It guides you through in a real world example that's creating a calendar. If that's not enough, there's some posts about people that wrote native modules, like explaining the process and these kind of things. But so far, I think that's about all we have. About making it easier, I'm not sure. I mean, it's, of course we can make it easier, but for now we don't have any plans on changing this interface yet.
Okay, I guess maybe something people could do if they have a good understanding is just maybe contribute more to the documentation and help out there, something like that, or maybe do blog posts or other examples, I guess, online also.
Yeah, definitely.
I think a good thing, or so if someone out there is listening that wants to do something like this, maybe do like a tutorial on actually doing this. That would be pretty interesting. I think a lot of people would be interested in watching that.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Like we try to promote these posts, and it's very helpful. A lot of people have been doing this kind of posts, and it's pretty nice. Also about the documentation contribution, that's really awesome. Like when people go through some trouble, please like open an issue. If you had any trouble with React Native or getting started, ping us or open an issue. Or if you feel like doing that, just help us improve the documentation. That's super helpful. And a lot of people don't see that like as contributing, but that's a huge part of it.
Yeah, and also you have a really, really good post that I found that goes into this exact topic. So maybe we'll put a link in our notes for that too.
Yeah, I've been trying to post more often. It's sometimes hard to find a topic, but I definitely want to do more of that. People seem to like the post and they want to help them understand better how things work under the hood of React Native.
So given your experience with iOS, how can I persuade my Swift friends to start using React Native over just writing native iOS apps?
Oh, that's a tough question. So one thing that I like to say is that if you have like an optimal native app and an optimal React Native app, the native app's going to be faster. If there's nothing else to be improved on both sides, the native app's going to be faster because it doesn't have the extra layer of abstraction that React brings. But our goal is to make like the average app, like you just write an app, you don't take like any crazy measures to improve performance. The average app could be as fast as an average React Native app, and that's our goal. And one thing is that all the performance improvements that come with the framework you get for free. It's much faster for prototyping, and if the native developers have been working on any like big native app, they probably know how painful it is to just recompile things all the time. So that's probably my favorite argument from my experience. It's really painful to just have to wait all that time for things to compile every time you rebase or anything like that.
Yeah, to me, that's one of the biggest things that I've seen. There's a lot of things I like about it, but the actual compilation time, just having that refresh and just not having to wait for the compilation is really awesome.
Plus the fact of the declarative UI that makes it much less error prone. I like Objective-C. I like iOS. I'm not really into Swift, but still, like I think that React's a great way of building UIs. I really like it.
Yeah, I hate using the storyboard mode in iOS too. So that's like a nice change of pace for me in React Native, where I could just kind of put my views together and things just work.
Yeah, during my iOS development time, that wasn't much, to be honest. I didn't really like using the storyboard or the interface builder at all. So I would mostly just write the interface, like instantiate the components like programmatically. But it's super painful. Like every time you move something, you have to change everything and reposition, and it's super error prone. So it's pretty bad.
Yeah, I know the feeling. I was just working on one of my first native apps, and I didn't want to use the storyboard at all, and everything was just so frail. You know, like so easy to fall apart. I was kind of like rethinking my whole method. Like maybe it is time to learn storyboard mode.
What are the future plans and ideas or features, I guess, and future releases of React Native that you're aware of? Like what's coming down the pipeline?
So things we want to do, we want to do, and they're not there yet. Like native animations. Right now we use animated. That's the JavaScript framework, but we want to move that JavaScript, that animations to be executed in the native side. So serialized animations and executed in the native side. That's a nice project that we want to get done. Or even if someone wants to contribute with that, it would be pretty nice. A lot of the efforts recently have really been around parity between Android and iOS. So we want to make it as painless as possible for people to switch between iOS and Android development with React Native. Another huge effort is going on Perf. We really want to make the React Native apps to feel like native. We don't want our apps to have like anything to lose from native apps. So.
Well, that's cool. I'll definitely be looking forward to all that stuff coming out. I know there's been a very, very, at least in my experience, there's been a very good experience dealing with the community. If I ever have any issues or questions, either if it's on what was the Slack channel, which now the Discord channel, or going and just talking to the community on Twitter or whatever, I've always had a really good experience having some type of feedback and helping me overcome any problems I've had so far. So that's been really good.
Yeah, I think the best things that just like, if you hit a problem, don't just give up. Like message us and like we are gonna try to fix it as soon as possible, and we are gonna help you. Just don't think twice before pinging someone or opening an issue, or just reach out to us, and we'll try to help you as soon as possible.
Well, have you guys been working with the WebKit to implement Perf in the JavaScript engine?
No, not really. We've been the Perf efforts recently have been around the platform itself and architecture change and all at the framework level. We haven't been doing any work at the engine level yet.
Okay, well, as far as developing these apps and submitting them to the app stores, what do you think Apple is ever going to have any issues as far as the development of JavaScript inside, as opposed to completely native code? Do you think is there any issues coming up as far as getting apps approved by the App Store there or anything like that?
Well, they clearly stated in the documentation that you can execute JavaScript. You can download the JavaScript as long as you execute that in their VM. I would hope not. Yeah, it's hard to tell, but I'm not expecting anything. I wouldn't say so. They just changed it to allow it, so yes, I wouldn't think so.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything there, but I was just out of curiosity also.
Sure. Yeah.
Before we wrap it up, is there anything else that you think you would like to talk about or go over?
No, I think that's just it. Like, thanks for everyone that's been contributing. Like, as a person in the other side, it's really awesome. Everyone gets excited when we see a nice message, and we really try to help everyone as much as we can. And again, like please, if you start using React Native and have any issues, just contact us, and it's also helping us. And yeah, and so far it's been great. I just hope that the community keeps helping us as much.
Okay, awesome. Okay, Peter, we're going to go ahead and go into the picks. Would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. So there's a fantastic article that came out by April Zero, the developer and co-founder of Gyroscope, about how they put together their React Native app. It's a Medium article. The link is a little too long, but definitely worth checking out because there's a ton of great insight.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll definitely link to that. Tadeu, do you have any picks for the episode?
Yes. There's a talk from the Strange Loop conference that came out actually a couple of months ago, but I just watched it now. It's called Propositions as Types. It's from Philip Wadler. It's very interesting, talking about the links between logic and computation. I didn't have any previous knowledge about that, and it's pretty nice to watch and have an idea about it.
Very cool. My pick is going to be November. I just came back from Nashville yesterday. Spent 2 days at the November conference, and it was really great. There was 4 different tracks, and basically every track I wanted to go to at least like 2 different talks during every session. So it was kind of hard to decide what to do. There was that much good content there. So I'm already looking forward to next year's November, and I encourage everybody to go. It's a really good deal for a conference, honestly. And it's in Nashville. It's a really fun city, and the conference was amazing. So everybody look out for that. Also, Jed and Kevin are there right now, and that's kind of why they're not attending this episode. So we're looking forward to having them back next week. Okay, well, Tadeu, I really appreciate you coming on with us and taking time out of your day to talk to us about React Native, and we really enjoyed it.
Thank you for inviting me. It was great.
All right, well, that will wrap up episode 8 of React Native Radio. We're looking forward to seeing everybody next week.